Hey there, and welcome into another episode of the Route 1 Rundown. I'm your host, Steve Gorgie, and I'm thrilled to be back to talk some Maryland basketball. I know it's been a little while. It was a bit of a summer vacation here, but I am back. Football season is just around the corner, and that means basketball season is just behind that. So from this point forward, every week through the end of the basketball season, you will have a new Route 1 Rundown, either wherever you get your podcast or if you're watching me on YouTube. And if you do want to watch it on YouTube, just a reminder that this show is part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV media network. So if you love local hoops, be it the Wizards, be it the Terps, be it the local high school scene, we all know this is one of the greatest areas in the world for basketball. You got to check out the Department of Hoops. So make sure you check it out. Make sure you subscribe and make sure you watch all of these episodes there if that's what you're into. If not, then go and check it out wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe. It'll be right there in your podcast feed. Again, I will be back week after week through the end of the basketball season because we are almost here. Summer is almost over. It's almost football season, and that means it is almost basketball season as well. So let's dive right back into things. But before I do, just a reminder, you can also find me across all social media platforms at the same handle. It's at Gorg on Sports. So really, let's get started now, and let's start with some recruiting news. We don't talk recruiting a ton on this show, but it's the middle of August, and the biggest news, not just for Maryland basketball, but probably all of college basketball, took place within the last week to 10 days, and that's Baba Oladotun, the top player in the class of 2027, according to 24/7 Sports, has reclassified to the class of 2026. That means in just 1 year, he will be on campus somewhere playing college basketball. And this is huge news, specifically from Maryland's perspective, because Baba is a local. He plays his basketball at Blake High School right now, a Montgomery County public school. He did play at DeMatha earlier in his career, but one of the top players in the country plays Maryland public high school basketball, which is something we just do not see a lot of in this day and age, especially in this area and nationally, even with all of the basketball factories out there. We just saw Derek Queen come from from Montverde, I should say, but IMG is another one that produces some of the most talented players in the country. This is not a sport anymore where you just go to your local public high school, shine, and then go play at the collegiate level. No, it is a job for so many of these kids from the time they are so young, and there are all these basketball-focused high schools out there. And then even locally here, even if it's a more traditional school, there are traditional schools, private schools with a lot of resources, be it a DeMatha, be it the WCAC schools, be it the schools in Baltimore, the Catholic schools in Baltimore. There are so many schools with so many resources that it's just so rare these days to see a talented basketball player like that, the number one player in the class of 2027, go to Blake High School, a public high school in Montgomery County. But nevertheless, that is where he is playing his high school basketball right now. Was the top player in the class of 2027, has reclassified to the class of 2026. And I think right now his ranking in that class of 2026 is number 8, according to 24/7 Sports nationally, number 5 in the 24/7 Sports composite rankings. Along with that reclassification news, the other big news for Maryland and Buzz Williams and his staff is that he will take an official visit to College Park in just a couple weeks here on September 13th. That will be Baba's first official visit. And look, it doesn't mean anything. It certainly doesn't mean that he is a lock to come to Maryland, but you'd rather get him on campus than not get him on campus. Everybody in the country is going after this guy. You look at the list of suitors: Kentucky, Arkansas, Indiana, Tennessee, Texas, UCLA, Michigan. The list goes on and on and on. I know Gonzaga has been mentioned at some point. Everybody wants this guy. This guy is a star. He's a guy, when you look at his game, who's a big wing guard. He's 6'9", 6'10", but he can defend multiple positions. He's He can shoot the ball. He's athletic. He has it all. When people talk about what he can work on, what he can develop, it's often strength. And he's a guy who has come up through the Team Durant AAU program. Well, Kevin Durant is the guy he is often compared to. He is a guy who seems to be as sure of a superstar, a surefire superstar at the collegiate level that you can possibly find. That's how big a deal he is, and that's why this is such a big deal. So Maryland will get him on campus for their first official visit. Again, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that Maryland is in the running, that Maryland is in the race. And I view this as a very good thing, a very good sign that Buzz Williams was able to get him on campus. But now is when we learn more about Buzz Williams. Now is when we learn more about Maryland's investment in basketball, because how much have we talked about that since Kevin Willard decided to leave the program and Kevin Willard decided to make all the comments that he made on his way out the door about what Maryland is, what Maryland can be. This is a recruitment that will give you some indication of what Maryland is and what Maryland is committed to doing when it comes to basketball. But I do view the fact that Buzz Williams was able to get him on campus as a very good sign. Am I expecting to land him? Absolutely not. It'd be impossible to say that, just given Maryland's track record with high-level recruitments like this over the course of many different coaches, I would never feel comfortable saying I expect to land him. But Maryland's name is in the ring. That's a good thing, and I think this will give us some indication about Maryland's commitment level. I'm not saying if they don't land him, they're not committed, but I think we will just get a better sense over the course of this recruitment what Maryland's commitment level is to this staff, to winning in this new era. So to me, that's the most interesting thing about this recruitment. Now, another guy who's going to be taking an official visit to Maryland just a week later is also in the class of 2026, and his name is Junior County. Junior County, not quite as highly rated as Baba is, but still a top 50 guy in the 24/7 sports composite rankings, number 28 in 24/7 sports rankings, the number 2 shooting guard in the whole class, according to 24/7 sports. He's playing his high school basketball out at Utah, and you look at the guy, or the teams rather, that are recruiting him. He's going to take an official visit to Maryland. He's also going to take one to UConn, Arizona, and Indiana, and he visited Purdue last November. That's a who's who, guys, of schools and programs that take this sport seriously. So when you look for indications of how Buzz Williams is going to be able to recruit here, how committed this Maryland program is to fielding a world-class basketball team, one that can compete for conference titles, one that can compete for Final Fours and national titles, it's a good sign to me that Maryland is in the conversation with those type of schools. Again, UConn, Arizona, Indiana, Purdue. It's a good sign to me that Maryland is showing up on a list with those schools. So I think this is another recruitment, and this is one where Buzz Williams and the staff had an existing relationship with Junior County going back to their days at A&M, and more you hear about the staff, it feels like they got a pre-existing relationship with a lot of talented basketball players out there. Another good thing, in my opinion. But this will be another recruitment, once again, where I think we find a little bit about what is Maryland's commitment level? Is Maryland willing to play the game? And there was a point in time playing the game had a negative connotation. Back in 2005, 2007, 2009, playing the game was a bad thing. Or in some circles, it was seen as a bad thing. It was you were coloring outside the lines. Well, that's not the case anymore. It is not the case anymore in college sports. Now there's revenue share. Now there are NIL deals that take place outside of revenue share. And we will, again, with this Junior County recruitment, I think, learn a lot about Maryland's commitment level, because UConn is committed. Arizona's committed. Purdue is committed. Indiana hasn't had the results on the court, but they are committed. So those are the two interesting things to watch for me as far as recruiting goes in the next month here. And those are two guys that will be on campus within the next month. So we don't always talk a lot of recruiting here. Those two names, those two guys were big enough, and that was big enough news to me that I think we needed to start the show with that. All right, let's get into something else. Going to continue doing some power rankings, some fun summertime topics, looking back at the history of Maryland basketball. One of my favorite things to do. A lot going on in the present, a lot going on in the future, but also fun to take a look back sometimes because Maryland has such a rich basketball history, and it's why I fell in love with this program. And sometimes the best ideas originate in the group chat. So got to give a big shout out here to Shane Connolly, who's been on the show before, because in our group chat, he asked the question, posed the question to our chat. What are your 5 most memorable, top, something along those lines, Maryland basketball moments that didn't happen in the last 5 minutes of the game? Now, I've modified it for today. My prompt today will be, what are your 5 most iconic Maryland basketball moments that didn't happen in the last 5 minutes in the game? But that's the origination of this. That's the origin, I should say, of this conversation, of this power ranking here. It is from the group chat. It's a really good question because we all remember the buzzer beaters, right? We'll always remember that Derek Queen buzzer beater against Colorado State in the second round this past season. We'll always remember Drew Nicholas against UNC Wilmington. Nobody forgets those. Nobody forgets John Gilchrist in the last 30 seconds or whatever it was against Duke in the 2004 ACC Championship, driving to the lane, getting fouled, and won. Everybody remembers that, right? The last 5 minutes, it's crunch time. We all remember that. But there are so many moments in a basketball game, and as you'll see on my list, before a basketball game sometimes, that are memorable, that will always remember where we were when those moments happened, that were as impactful to a game, or at least our memory of a game, as something that happens in the final minute or two of said game. So that is the prompt today. What are your 5 most iconic Maryland basketball moments that didn't happen in the last 5 minutes of a game? So hit me up across social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. I'm on it all. Hit me up there and tell me, what are your 5 most iconic Maryland basketball moments that didn't happen in the last 5 minutes of a game? Because I know there are a bunch I am probably missing. This list is going to be unique to me. These are the moments that I will always remember when I say what's iconic, but wasn't necessarily right in crunch time there. So I want to start off with a couple honorable mentions as always. And this first one is one I was not around for, one I was not alive for, one that actually doesn't even truly fit the criteria of this list because it happened with about 3.5, 4 minutes to go in a ball game. But I think it's one of the most iconic moments in Maryland basketball history and warrants mentioning because I really feel like this fits the spirit of what I'm talking about here. So 1986, Maryland's on the road at North Carolina against number 1 North Carolina in the Dean Dome. Maryland down 9 with under 4 minutes to go. And I know if you're listening to the show, I know if you're listening to this program right here, you have seen this clip a million times. Len Bias hits a jumper, steals the ball, reverse jam. Oh my! Everybody knows that. If you love Maryland basketball, if you've spent time watching this program, whether it's watching a game, you've seen that clip, whether it's browsing YouTube, you've seen that clip. One of the most iconic moments in the history of Maryland basketball. Oh my. Len Bias, oh my. Jumper, steal, reverse jam. And that cut the lead to 4 for North Carolina with about, I think it was 3.5 minutes to go. It was certainly under 4. Amazingly, in 1986, they did not just constantly have a score bug in the corner anywhere. It's kind of tough to watch those games. But either way, Maryland comes back, sends it to overtime, ultimately wins that game, hands North Carolina their first loss ever in the Dean Dome, their stadium that opened about a month prior in January of 1986. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for here. That's an honorable mention for me because it doesn't fit the criteria. Another one that I was not there for, but I have just, it's become like urban legend to me, is Steve Francis at Midnight Madness 1998. You got to remember when you talk about a guy like Steve Francis, If he were playing today in 2025, everybody would have seen his highlights. He'd be all over YouTube. He'd be all over TikTok. Everybody would know what to expect. You'd have all these great basketball analysts out there talking about what he's adding to this Maryland team and how he's going to make them a national contender. But you got to remember, back in 1998, with a guy coming from Allegheny Community College, we didn't have any of that. It was just such a different world. It was such a different way of and coverage of college basketball. We didn't know what we were getting in Steve Francis. So I wasn't there, but I've heard it from so many people so many times that when Steve Francis came out and threw down that first dunk at Midnight Madness in 1998, the place was electric. And it was a time when you actually used to have Midnight Madness at midnight, and it was a big deal, and Cole Fieldhouse would fill up, and people were excited about it. It was just a different time, and that's a moment that, although I wasn't there, is iconic to me. It's etched in my memory forever because I've heard about it so many times from people who love Maryland basketball and were there that night. So those are a couple honorable mention moments for me and the kind of things that I'm going for with this list. So let's get into my actual top 5, and I'll start with number 5. At number 5, I have a moment that actually happened prior to a game. And let me set the scene for you, because things were tense around Maryland basketball at that time. This week in 2009, Maryland lost a game to Boston College at home to fall to 13-7, 2-4 in the ACC, not having a good year at the time. Okay, not a big deal. Bad years happen every once in a while. But we're looking at a post-national championship run where in 2003 was a good year. Let's just start there, actually, after the national championship. 2003, good year. They go to a Sweet 16. It was kind of a continuation of that run. But everybody expected the program was going to just elevate to this new level post-national championship. And that recruiting class, that class of 2003, I believe it was one of the best recruiting classes Maryland had ever brought in. I mean, there was so much hype around that recruiting class that included guys like Mike Jones was the big one on that team. Who else was in that recruiting class? Mike Jones, DJ Strawberry, Kenny Abekwe. Those were all guys that were part of that recruiting class. And so 2003, good year, continuation. But everybody expected more and more and more. Like Maryland was just going to be going to Final Four after Final Four after Final Four from this point forward. The program had elevated. The program had changed. Well, not so fast. 2004 struggled through a lot of the year. Of course, ultimately end up winning the ACC tournament, ending on a positive. And everybody thought, like, okay, it was some growing pains, but now they're really going to elevate. John Gilchrist is coming back. Maryland was highly ranked going in the 2005 season. Get a big win against Memphis early that I'll never forget. I remember I was like early in high school then, calling a buddy of mine, being like, oh, this team's going to win the national championship, because we just thought that was kind of normal at that point, right? We're like, this is a national championship program. This is what we do. Well, 2005 ends in disappointing fashion. They missed the tournament. 2006 ends in disappointing fashion. They missed the tournament. 2007, a really good bounce back year. A bit of redemption for that class of 2003. And they went out on a high-ish note. They get a 4 seed in the tournament, lost a disappointing second round game to Butler, but it was a positive. 2008, some good moments. That was my freshman basketball season at Maryland as a student. Some good moments. Beating North Carolina on the road was a great one with Boom Osby, but ultimately disappointing one. They missed the tournament. So 3 times in 4 years now, they have missed the tournament. In 2009, this week that I'm talking about, they had fallen to 13-7, 2-4. In addition to that, there was a lot going on between Gary Williams and the athletic department. There was some back and forth in the newspaper at the time where Gary Williams basically was questioned about some recruiting misses or some guys that he'd actually landed but were not playing at Maryland, particularly Gus Gilchrist and Tyree Evans, and he said it wasn't his fault they're not there. Kathy Worthington, a senior associate athletic director, actually commented back publicly, said she was very surprised by Gary's comments, and it was ugly. It was ugly. Gary fires back with the famous line, Kathy Worthington's never won a national championship. I think the exact quote is, here it is, Kathy Worthington doesn't speak for me. She has never won a national championship. She has never done anything. She's an associate AD. And with all of that, there was also chatter behind the scenes that Debbie Yao, the AD at the time, who Gary Williams did not have a good relationship with, or at least that was always the rumor, that she was making phone calls about trying to potentially oust Gary Williams. Gary Williams, the guy who took this program from absolutely nothing in its darkest days to a national championship less than a decade earlier. We're talking still in 2009 right now, okay? 7 years from the 2002 national championship. So I say all that to say, to set this scene, that Maryland played Miami on a Saturday night at the end of January. And if you were involved in the message board world at all at the time, if you were tied in with Maryland basketball, you had heard all this, you had read all this throughout the week, and it really felt like the word to describe Gary Williams at that point was embattled. He was embattled, and it felt like the program that he had given so much to was kind of turning on him. That's how it felt. To me, Gary Williams always deserved every benefit of the doubt you could give him when it came to basketball because of what he did for this program and the heights he took them to, and his passion for the university. I don't think an outsider, quite honestly, could have done what he did, or at least did it in the way that he did it, with the passion and the connection to the university, which I think actually meant a lot to the fans and the fan base. And it was just a different kind of relationship with a coach than you might have with, say, a Kevin Willard. Okay? So Maryland came into that game kind of season on the brink. Gary Williams, kind of everything he had built seemingly on the brink. And there's a large group of people who really supported Gary Williams that rallied around him at the time. There were pins passed out that game. I can't remember exactly what they said. They might have said, "In Gary we trust." They might have said something about our coach. They might have just said Gary. I can't remember. But there was pins being passed out. And if you've watched Maryland basketball, if you were a fan during the Gary Williams era, you know how Gary Williams would enter the arena before a game. The patented fist pump. If you're younger, if you're a Maryland fan who wasn't around during the Gary Williams era, Gary Williams would, when he would walk out of the tunnel, he would give his patented fist pump. Little gesture to the crowd, right? Well, that night, walking out of the tunnel, Gary Williams gave a fist pump like I've never seen before. Unlike one I saw before any Duke game, unlike one I saw at an ACC tournament, unlike any I saw in an NCAA tournament game. Gary Williams swung his fist like he was going to take somebody's head off coming out of that tunnel that night. I've never seen anything like it before. I've never seen anything like it since. That moment will always be etched in my memory, and that team played with a different energy that night. Of course, Debbie Yao was not able to oust Gary Williams, if that's indeed what she was trying to do behind the scenes. And this actually sparked a pretty nice little run for the Terps, where they would go on to make the NCAA tournament. They'd beat North Carolina at home later in the season. That's a North Carolina team that went on to win a national championship. They'd go to the second round of the NCAA tournament. They'd make the tournament as a 10 seed. And it was really a jumping off point for a good 2010 season. I always contend that making an NCAA tournament with Dave Neal as your starting center is one of Gary Williams' greatest accomplishments. And in a lot of ways, it started with that fist pump on that night against Miami. So for me, number 5 is Gary Williams' fist pump in 2009 prior to the Miami game. At number 4, let's go to something that's a bit more of the modern era, although 10 years ago now. 2015, Maryland's playing Michigan State at home, and Melo Trimble crosses up Tum Tum Nairn right before halftime, hits a 3 to give Maryland a 40-26 lead. Maryland would roll in that one and ultimately win 75-59. And that was such, to me, a Maryland is back moment. Because again, you got to set the stage. You got to remember what was going on with the program at the time. Mark Turgeon's first 3 years, Really bad. No two ways about it. Missed the tournament in each of his first 3 seasons. All 3 seasons in the ACC, he missed the tournament. In comes Melo Trimble in 2014-15 season. They get off to that great start. They go out to the tournament over Thanksgiving. They beat Arizona State. They beat Iowa State, and it felt like Maryland had something here. They go on the road to Michigan State. They get that win. They start out 13-1, and it felt like something was really building. And this was probably one of, if not the first home game. There was a Virginia game earlier in the season. This was the first Big Ten home game that really felt like a big deal. Michigan State coming in. It feels like there's all this momentum. Maryland 16-2 entering the game, and Melo Trimble crosses up Tum Tum there and hits that step back 3. And it's a moment that will always be etched in my memory. I talk a lot about, I just didn't feel like during the Turgeon era, there were that many moments. There weren't those memorable moments that made it just so fun to be a fan. There were some good teams. There were some good games, but the moments were lacking. When I did the draft on Matt Moderno's podcast about best players of the last 25 years, I was surprised when you look at them individually, how many Turgeon guys you wanted to draft. And we did make sure we were drafting, players from each era, from Gary era, Turgeon era, Willard era, which changed the results of the draft a little bit. But anyway, it just made you feel like there's so many good guys. How did they not have more moments? For me, though, this was one of those moments. This was really a Maryland is back moment. And it did spark a nice little era, a nice little run of pretty good success under Mark Turgeon. Not the heights anybody wanted, but back in the tournament, consistent tournament team, something to be excited about year after year, which didn't seem like was really going to happen after those first 3 seasons. So that checks in at number 4 for me. Number 3, let's go back to the ACC days. And let's go to that 2010 team, one of my favorite teams of all time. And the number 3 moment for me was less than 6 minutes into the 2010 home game against Duke, the last home game of the season, senior night for Gravis Vasquez, senior night for Eric Hayes, senior night for Landon Milbourne. This was a group that had been through a lot. This was a group that was leading the team to a very good season, and that place was on fire coming out. That team was on fire coming out. They get up to a lead early, and just under 6 minutes in, they're on the fast break. Gravis is coming down the floor. Jordan Williams, the freshman big man, running the court with him. Gravis throws a no-look pass to Jordan Williams, who dunks on now Duke head coach Jon Scheyer. They call Scheyer for the foul and 1, and the place absolutely loses. The place goes crazy. And that was a close game throughout, but in that moment, I looked around. I said, there's no way Maryland's losing this game. There is no way Maryland is losing this one. And that is the moment. Gravis had that great shot towards the end of the game, but that is the moment that I will always think of when I think about that game. One of my favorite wins of all time, one of my favorite plays of all time, one of my favorite Maryland moments of all time is Jordan Williams dunking on Jon Scheyer early in that game. The place going crazy with the gold rush. Just an all-time Maryland basketball memory for me, and it happened with way more than 5 minutes to play in the game. Number 2 for me is what I initially thought would be my number 1 until I thought about this one a little more. Number 2 to me is one of the most iconic moments in Maryland basketball history, regardless of when it happened. It's Ohi Steele. Maryland Duke 2002. Last ever Maryland Duke game at Cole Fieldhouse. And the rivalry was at a fever pitch at that point. Everybody knows what happened the year before in 2001, gone in 54 seconds. Maryland goes down to Cameron, wins. Then they lose an ACC tournament game to them. Heartbreaking. Nate James tip-in. Then they blow the big lead in the Final Four. Earlier in the season, Maryland goes to Cameron and loses. But it was Maryland's turn. Maryland hosts Duke. Again, last ever Maryland Duke game at Cole Fieldhouse. It felt like a big deal at that time. If you didn't get a chance to set foot in Cole Fieldhouse, I'm sorry, because it was an atmosphere unlike any other, especially for a big game like that. The place was going nuts from the start. Best atmosphere I've ever been in my entire life. Just absolutely incredible. And late in the first half, Steve Blake drives to the bucket, hits a floater. Maryland goes up 36-29. If you watch the TV copy, you hear the announcer say, Duke looks tired. The place is going crazy. This is what every Maryland fan's been waiting for. This is what this Maryland program has been waiting for, to beat Duke, to show the world that Maryland was the best team in college basketball that season. Duke's holding for the last shot. Jay Williams looks over at Coach K. Blake picks his pocket. Billy Packer, who's the color analyst calling that game, is flustered, doesn't know what's going on. He yells, "Oh, he steal!" And Blake goes coast to coast for the basket. I've never been in a louder environment than Cole Fieldhouse after Steve Blake stole the ball from Jay Williams and made that layup. When I think about that 2002 team, when I think about that era of Maryland basketball, that is the singular moment that comes to my mind. It's one of my favorite moments ever, but it's not the most important moment, which is why my number one spot goes to Juan Dixon in the national championship game. And it's kind of a combo play here, but Maryland did not play well for large portions of that game, but they were still in control for most of that game. But with just under 10 minutes to go, Indiana took their first lead of the entire ball game. Maryland down 44-42. Dixon hadn't had a bucket since like the 10-minute mark in the first half. Hits a three from the left side, gives Maryland a 1-point lead. You could breathe easy a little bit again. Then a little bit back and forth. A couple minutes later, just about 8 minutes left. Dixon drives to the left, stops on a dime, hits a fadeaway J, puts Maryland back up 49-46, extends that 1-point lead to a 3-point lead. And I always think those two shots were the reasons, those were the moments. That was why Maryland ultimately won that national championship game. And I think it was so important because you have to understand all the baggage of being a Maryland fan at the time. You know, I was pretty young. I was 13. I didn't have all the baggage and the weight that older Maryland fans, that my parents, that my brothers, that my cousins carried. But I understood just from the previous couple of seasons, just from the 2001 season alone, gone in 54 seconds. The blown Final Four game against Duke, so many moments, so many ACC tournament games against Duke and North Carolina where they just couldn't get over the hump. They couldn't make the right plays at the right moments. You always felt like something was going to go wrong. You always felt like they were going to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Because that was kind of Maryland's MO going all the way back to the Lefty years. So even as a younger fan, I carried a lot of that with me. And when Maryland didn't play great in that first half, but was still relatively in control, Dixon was not having his best game. Blake certainly was not having his best game. Jared Jeffries was really starting to get going and kind of give Chris Wilcox the work. And it felt like a little bit like, oh, man, well, Maryland hasn't played well. They were up. Now here comes Indiana. Maryland doesn't have the lead anymore. Dixon's not playing well. Blake's not playing well. Jeffries is getting going. What's going to happen? Lo and behold, Juan Dixon did what Juan Dixon always did. He delivered at the key moment. So with just about 8 minutes left, he hits that first shot to put Maryland back on top. Then a few minutes later, he hits that iconic drive left, stop on a dime, fadeaway J to give Maryland a 49-46 lead, extend that lead. The rest is history. So those are my 5 most iconic Maryland basketball moments that happened outside the last 5 minutes of a ball game. Hit me up. Tell me yours. Whatever social media platform you're using, leave them in right here in the YouTube comments. Leave them on Spotify, on Apple, wherever you're listening to this thing, or hit me up on social media at Gorg on Sports. That's the show for today. I am so excited that basketball season is this close. I'm telling you, it's right around the corner. I can feel it. I can smell it. Football's first, then basketball. So I will be with you once a week, every week from this point forward. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, and make sure you tell a friend. Until next time, this has been the Route 1 Rundown.